Welcome back to another episode of Shift with Elena and John. Today I sit down with Dr. John A. King. He's the founder of Give Them a Voice Foundation and a passionate advocate for trauma recovery and anti-trafficking work. In this candid and deeply moving conversation, John really opens up about his own journey from surviving years of childhood abuse and discovering his true heritage to nurturing relentless resilience and finding purpose in advocacy. Whether you're a survivor, an ally, someone looking to better understand trauma's impact, this conversation will move, inform, and inspire you. Please, as always, subscribe, like, and come back for more. Dr. John A. King, welcome to the Shift Path podcast.
Well, thank you very much. I'm excited to be here and meet with you.
Yeah, I'm really excited to hear your story and the work that you're doing. But before we go into, all the awesome things you're doing today and just the important work that you're doing, take me back to your own story and just kind of like how you came to even, work so deeply in trauma recovery and what motivated you essentially to start the Give Them a Voice Foundation, among other things that you've kind of created.
Sure. So it's a bit wiggly at the front end. There's got a point halfway through, which is actually the beginning, which is a bit odd. So in 2008, I had recall of being sexually abused by the people who raised me. It was the women. They're the ones who sexually abuse, and we would call that trafficking now. So it wasn't just women who abused me. I was an equal opportunity victim, for want of a better term. It was both male and female. And so that happened for about 14 years until I was at the age of 16. And I sort of locked that away and locked it down and didn't really know who I was. And it's funny, when you grow up in an environment like that, you don't have anything to compare it with. So that's your normal. And what happened in '08 is I had like these little frames, like old 8mm film. You're probably too young to remember 8mm films. But these little films of frame, little pictures in my head. And in 2008, they all strung together and played. And they played continuously for about 7 years. And for the very first time, I realized that this was an aberration that had happened throughout my young childhood. And so I went through that process. And it was actually only 18 months ago that I found out that my family, my heritage is actually Australian Aboriginal, Indigenous. And part of the Australian government policy was to breed the black out. And they would take blonde-haired, brown-eyed kids off their parents and put them with European families. So my heritage and my culture is very mixed there. So for me now it makes a little bit more sense, but it's very convoluted journey towards adulthood that has, and there's been these several bumps in the road where I've had to make decisions about falling forward or collapsing in a screaming heap. And I think my whole adult life has been consciously or subconsciously committed to, if it worse, crawling forward one step at a time.
Mhm. I just want to dissect a little bit. So what has happened at that kind of age of 28, you said?
No, when I had
What?
recall was in 2008. I was
2008,
25.
sorry, 2008. Yeah. So what was it that in 2008 that has triggered it, I guess, where you started to?
Daffodils. So daffodils. When when I was younger, I would, if the nights were too dark and it was too violent, I would walk to school in the morning. And there was a lady, she was about 3 or 4 doors down, Mrs. McGregor, and she had this big green bank and she grew these plum trees. None of these plum trees she'd have daffodils. And when I used to walk together in springtime, I used to look and think, the daffodils are blooming, I've made it one more year. And so that was a childhood memory. And back in 2008, it was on a Thursday at around 10:45. I had some daffodils growing around a writer's shed that I had at a previous place. And I stepped over these daffodils and I said to myself, they are so beautiful. And that was the moment that my subconscious opened up and my mind just vomited all these memories over a very pristine, orderly life.
Mhm. Yeah, I can see how that brings it back. Where were you living? So you said your origins go to Australia. Where were you living at that time?
I was in Texas.
In Texas. How long
Yeah.
have you been in Texas? most of your life,
Um,
or?
Not first plane after 9/11. I came over, I flew over here and
Okay.
got involved in non-profit work and for-profit work and started. I'm a bit of a serial entrepreneur like yourself, and started a range of businesses.
Okay. And so, talk to me a little bit about, you have this kind of, you talk a lot about living in spite of trauma.
Yeah.
So talk to me about that.
Well, your past will either refine you or define you. It'll either be the one thing that you um, define your whole life and existence by what happened in the past, or to refine you and make you into a better person. And I think they are very conscious choices. Now, whether it's the trauma of military, law enforcement, childhood issues, or business collapse, relational collapses, they're all milestones that we've got to make decisions about what we're going to do with them. And the conscious decision we have to make is, will this define me or refine me? Will I become better and bigger than this? Will it make me into who I'm supposed to be? Or am I going to be stuck telling a story about what could have been? And I think that's absolutely essential for anybody who's going to build forward into something better.
Mm. Tell me a little bit more about how I absolutely, I think that there's a lot of almost like you have, your mind can either be your worst enemy or your best friend, right? And
Absolutely.
it's
Yeah.
like and controlling that story is so difficult for, for just, it's like the worst thing that's ever happened to you is the worst thing that ever happened to you. And for most people, it's pretty, standard things that kind of happen to them. But in case of like real trauma, right? Something that you went through and in 2008, this kind of triggered and I'm sure opened up a whole lot of things that you never even, you haven't thought about in years. How did you, like, what story was playing and how did you overcome and change that story?
Well, that's a great question. How did I change the story? Well, I actually believe I had to write the story for the very first time. I think up to that point, like many of us, I'd been living from the outside in. I took my social cues from who I was supposed to be, how I was supposed to act, what I was supposed to like, what I was supposed to dress, eat, wear, etc. And when John Ageddon, as my internal marketing department calls it, when John Ageddon happened, I literally went cognitively from John 1.0 to John 2.0. My left brain, goal driven, focused guy, I didn't want to be that guy anymore. Wanted to smoke cigars and write poetry. Literally, there was a shutting down of aspects of my brain and a awakening of aspects of my brain that had never really been alive before. So it was an incredible neurological shift. And I realized that I didn't know who I was. I didn't know who I was metaphysically. I didn't know who I was sexually. I didn't know because all of so you imagine I've been having sex since I was 4 years old. So my sexual experiences, which is a fundamental aspect of us as human beings, have been forced or molded based on a whole range of premises that I had no control over. And so that very essence of who I was like, who are you? What do you like? What is enjoyable? What is permissible? All of those questions, fundamental questions. Even so, what do I find joy in? I was never allowed to enjoy something for myself. I had to enjoy what those people that were, my abusers wanted me to enjoy to appease them. So I had to strip all that away and I had to really sit with myself for the very first time and start the process of living from the inside out. And it's probably, it's a long process. It's the most rewarding, but part of the hardest work I think anybody will ever do is flipping that switch from outside in to inside out.
Mm. Yeah, and I mean, it's a hard switch to flip for sure. And I know, I mean, it's awesome that you were able to do it. And I just think of how many people are just not able to do that, which is, why you do the work that you do, which we'll come back to in just a moment, because I think it's so important. But at what age did you, so you said 16, from 4 to 16, at that age, did you leave the space or how did you get out of that?
I got too big. I was
Mm-hmm.
turning into a 6 foot, 180 pound young man, and I just did not want to be told what to do anymore.
Mm.
Something happened. I was there was attempted violence with a knife. Someone tried to stab me, one of the people that were raising me, and I got beaten up pretty bad, and I just wasn't going to do it anymore. So I think that was part of it. But then I still stayed in that environment for many years, and that's one thing I don't think people understand about the nature of trauma, particularly to a child, is you have nowhere to go. I remember at 7 years of age running away and telling the neighbor, telling the lady who lived next door what had happened to me. And she beat me and dragged me back by my ear, literally, because a mother would never do that to a child. And it was probably 40 years before I told the story again. And
Mm.
and I think that's that part of it. You grow up in this space, and it's the only space you know. It's not until you actually move way beyond it and realize the world operates differently, that you can start to ask some of those questions. And for women, it seems to happen earlier, their ability to ask the questions and challenge it. For most men, it happens between about 35 and 45. They get recall of these events.
Mm. Why do you think why is that? Is there any literature behind that? I'm just curious, like what's
Um,
the is it that
no,
midlife moment?
I think part of it's a midlife reassessment.
Mm-hmm.
And I think historically, um, discussing male sexual abuse and trafficking, we haven't done. Unfortunately, it's okay to talk about a lady with a traumatic background or the fact that someone was sexually abused. We can have those conversations and share sympathy and empathy. But for a guy to do it, it's really still, for me, this was 15 years ago. So the world was a different place 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But still today, one of the major challenges is men. As a man, you don't want to be that vulnerable. You want to have somehow protected your 4-year-old self, because as protectors, that's what we want to do. I wanted to protect my 4-year-old self and have enough moxie to be able to stand up for him, and I wasn't able to. So then, on top of the shame of the activities, comes the shame of the self guilt and self doubt about why weren't you man enough to stand up for that little boy. So there's all these and at some point something just breaks, and most guys get recall at about that age. That's the only way I've been able to explain it. My brain just knew I needed to process something, and it just so went about doing it without my permission.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. Yeah. It's yeah, it makes sense that because it's always there, and I think it just depends on the triggers and the moments and so on. So it's I mean we see this quite a lot with like veterans and stuff, like people
Yeah.
that come from wars, and it just just one day just something happens, but it's actually something that happened many, many years ago. I'm curious, so up until the age of, up until 2008, how was, your interactions in the world, your relationships, like how was that 20 or so years between when maybe turned it into a young man and then into like an adult man, so to say?
Um, Very performance based, very much living from the outside in. My first marriage, it exploded, imploded. Uh, she couldn't cope with the impact of the recall. And I understand it. I go from John 1.0 to John 2.0. John
Mm,
1.0 was very articulate and flying around the world and making, $750,000 in a consulting business. And John 2.0 was a stuttering, babbling mess. And she didn't want to cope with that. She didn't have the grace for that. And so I think through that whole process that people, um, they lusted the gift and didn't love the man, is probably the best way to do it. They lusted my ability to make money, my ability to perform, my ability to lead, my ability to be able to build businesses. But when the yogurt hit the fan, you know, it was all hands off. So it was a really difficult period, particularly those first 5 years after recall. Um, that's where I lost my marriage, very estranged to my kids, living in a one bedroom. It wasn't until I met Melissa, and she literally saw what someone else saw as trash as her treasure. And it was a key moment in turning my life, towards hope. She's been fundamental. She still is. She's
That's your wife now, Melissa.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, she is. She's my wonderful.
that's beautiful. I just, as you're speaking, I just think of like how many people are, living their day-to-day lives, working in organizations, and dealing with a lot of that heaviness,
Yeah.
and I just wonder like how can, I'm in talent development, of course, so like I work, sometimes with an HR team, sometimes like as my own kind of department. And I'm just thinking like and I just, there's just so much that we don't know about the person that's working next to us sometimes. And it's like, how can companies, I guess, be more aware or support individuals that have gone through trauma or potentially going like other like symptoms, signs, like how like do you do any work through your advocacy work with organizations?
Yeah, we work a lot with HR departments, not so much in identifying it because, people nowadays are very averse to putting labels on anything,
Mm-hmm.
but really working with people in the terms of self-advocacy. Like if you've got a challenge, particularly if you're going into a medical space, you need to be able to develop a skill set of self-advocacy. So we'll work with environments that encourage self-advocacy. But the challenge you've got nowadays is the nomenclature of victimhood, where people want to make an excuse for everything. And everything's going to trigger them from the aerosol to the whatever, someone wearing a hat or a t-shirt they don't like. And it's really difficult to have honest conversations with people who can't be honest with themselves. So you end up with a HR department who caters for everybody or nobody. And because it lacks authenticity, because we're not really sure who and whom and what we're being authentic to. And that's a
Mm-hmm.
major challenge because you're not going to ever get far down the track of recovery if you cannot be authentic with yourself and with other people around you. Because trauma recovery has got very little to do with the external. It is all the work that you've got to do on the inside.
So to that point, what are some practical things that people can do that are helpful for somebody like just starting that work? Somebody's listening to this, or just somebody's living with somebody who's dealing with trauma. Like, what are some things that you recommend for people to start with?
I've got a program we actually pulled together for the podcast in a minute. But for them to start with, believe it or not, if you go to bed at the same time every night and get up at the same time every day, okay, you get up and you have a breakfast, a high protein, high fat breakfast, low carb. Get rid of processed food out of your diet. Get rid of sugars as much as you can out of your diet. Get rid of food coloring out of your diet. So if you're getting good sleep, you're getting up and going to bed at reasonable time, no blue screens for at least an hour, hopefully 2 hours before you go to bed. Just that alone will probably solve 70% of people's anxiety and depression, believe it or not. And then you can add in red light, stand in the sun for 20 minutes, have a cold shower. Cold showers will give you 80% of the benefit of a cold plunge. Do 30 minutes of exercise 5 times a week. That's walking around the block, man. Like listen to a half an album, as we used to call it back in the days. So, those are very simple things. Be careful of what you listen to. Not only the words, but the music. Be careful of what you watch. Um, Doom scrolling is the death of you as a person. It's an actual thing, It's so what are you feeding your soul with? Take responsibility for all of that, and you can literally fight your way through.
For people who might not be familiar with the impact of the lack of protein or the food, just overall the quality of food that we put into our bodies, tell me a little bit more about the importance of the light, the sleep, the routine of waking up same time, going to sleep. Like what if you don't do it, which so many people don't,
Mhm.
but I think it's the norm, so they don't feel the impact. Tell me a little bit more about the actual impact for people who are not familiar with it.
So just even fluorescent lighting or LED lighting runs off a blue light, and that blue light actually wakens your mind up. Whereas natural light is an orange or a yellow based light, and as the sun comes over and goes down, the pitch and the change of that moves through the oranges and into the reds. So if you're sitting looking at a TV, normally a very big TV nowadays, or you're sitting looking at a phone, and all you're getting is blue light, you're actually telling your brain to wake up and you're overstimulating your courses. That's why you've got to actually stop that before you go to bed. Waking up and going to bed at the same time gives you a sense of habit. We like habits. Our bodies like habits. We want to be in habit. Why high fat, high protein? Do some reading around the carnivore diet. Now, look, I know people get tied to particular things for particular reasons. And I was a vegan for 18 months, worst 18 months of my life. I did the vegetarian thing for a while. But then when I came down to mental health and understanding my DNA as an Aboriginal man, I needed to be on a high fat diet. I needed high fat and I needed high protein. And I needed white chemical. If you can't pronounce it, don't eat it. It's a simple rule. High cornstarch fruit syrup. It's what? Sugar. Just have some
Hmm.
sugar. Have a teaspoon of sugar in your coffee. So these are very simple things, and they're not difficult.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, I mean, I think now there's this big push on wellness, and I think we're a little bit more educated about the impact of all these things. But I think
Yeah,
that, the amount of anxiety that food choices may alone like have on a human brain is
yeah.
wild.
I think you're absolutely right. People trip out. They don't know. They get paralyzed because I'm supposed to be vegan and save the cows from farting, and I'm supposed to be this, and what's actually vegetarian? Am I a pescatarian or a veg? It's a lot of stress. So just, you know, you've got to strip a lot of that away and ask yourself, why am I doing these things? And what should I be doing for me?
Yeah, and I mean, but what I was also saying is just that sometimes all the sugary foods and the lack, and when you're not eating enough protein, like that
Yeah,
alone will actually trigger anxiety in your brain,
absolutely.
and it will
Absolutely.
stress your body out. And that's why people are like, oh, I'm stressed and I'm stressed out and I'm depressed, I'm anxious. Well, it's like you're eating crap all day. You know what I mean? So,
Sugar is a drug. I got a friend of
yes.
mine who came off out of drug rehab. He said it was
Mm-hmm.
harder for him to give up sugar than it was for hard drugs because of the chemical impact in his body.
Mm. Yeah, no, I believe it. It's my audience knows I care very much about this topic, and so I'm not going to bore them with it yet again. But it is very important. So do your research, people, because what you put in your body is probably causing a lot of
Yes,
unnecessary anxiety.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. So, what do you see as like the biggest unmet need in the trauma recovery?
Is actually tools. So that's why we created the programs we did. There's a
Mm,
lot of hokey science out there. I spent 15 years and $200,000 in my own recovery, and I was blessed to be in a position to be able to do that. But I don't want other people to have to do that, and to have the sheer stubbornness to be able to spend that much money and that many times to get well. Most people don't have that. They don't know where to start, to be honest. And I was just fortunate enough to be able to work that out for me.
mm,
And so I think that's part of why we built the collective and the Mindfire Challenge was to give people a place where they can start to see transformation after 18 months. The thought for people looking down the road at 15 years, doing the numbers and saying, well, you're telling me I'm not going to be good for until I'm 45 if they're at 30. I think that's overwhelming for people. And I think if they can find a way to shorten that, but shortening it meaningful, because you've got to still do the work, but you have to do it in such a way that the change is actually a transformational change. It's not just trying to tick a box. I've done it. And anything of any value is worth paying for. And you pay with your time, talent, and your treasure. You have to put the hard work in to get the change to stick and stay if you want to make it work for you. And people sometimes are just not prepared to do that, you know?
yeah, well, it's the hardest thing to face yourself, to do the job, do the work yourself.
Yeah,
That's
it
the
is.
hardest. That's and the older we get, and depending on various situations, it's very hard. It's a very hard journey. Um, what when you speak of tools, give me an example of like some tools that you guys have, created, or like what is it? What would a tool look like?
So, so I did this documentary on my story called Stopping Traffic. And through that process, I met thousands of people who wondered, why hadn't I killed myself? How did I get well? So I took 6 weeks and I think it was 2 boxes of cigars and sat in my garage and wrote down everything that I took 15 years to learn. And that became a book. And we've taken that book, and my wife and I teach this book, and we teach it over a 12-week period. And we do it in very small slices. I'm a pilot, and as a pilot, if you take off, and you're supposed to be heading somewhere, if you're only off course by 2 degrees, you're going to end up 20 to 30 miles off from where you need to be. And often people think, well, I'm going to get lost. How do I ever get back to there? It's 2 degrees back the other way. It's every
Mm,
day, small things consistently over an extended period of time. And so, what we've done with the collective and with the Mind Fire Challenge is that we've taken those things and broken them down, put in an environment which is very affirmative, and said, we're going to walk with you, but you're going to have to do the work. And if you don't do the work, I'll be very gracious about it, but I'm going to point that out to you. Because the
mm,
only person who's responsible for getting you whole is you. And so that's why we created the Phoenix Collective. And within that, the Mind Fire Challenge was a challenge we put together so people can come, try, and see and change. And that's available to all your people for free.
mm. Yeah, and I think that's so important to have that community and that support, right? Like it's hard to, yeah, you can get it out, you need to do this for yourself, but also like to have that support and guidance, I think is half the battle. At least that's what I would imagine.
You really do need it, Elaine. Oh, you can't do it by yourself. The power of the
Mm,
partner. Um, and if you don't have a spouse who will walk with you, I didn't have a spouse that would walk with me. So I had to go out and build it. And as I said, I was fortunate to meet Melissa and fortunate to meet two or three other people that are still my very dear friends that didn't wipe me off, but gave me a second chance. And I've come to learn the grace of a second chance is one of the most beautiful things that any human being can ever be given.
yeah.
And I just want to see that for everybody. I want to see everybody who doesn't think they're worth it or the fact that they're out of time. I want to see them find a second chance, That's important to me.
Mm. And when it comes to just the work that you're doing with human trafficking, and is it human
Mhm.
trafficking or child trafficking or sex trafficking? What is it specifically?
Any human trafficking across the board, war, labor, sex, any human
Mm,
trafficking, post-traumatic stress. That's what Give Them the Voice Foundation focuses on that. We were involved in the tail end of the Epstein case and the guy who took over from him, the Nygaard case.
mm. And when did you start? When did you get involved in that?
Um, I was approached about halfway through my recovery because they were looking for someone that was prepared to liaison with the government and work with the government. And I did all the upfront work, and then we had a team that did all the back as far as situations in housing kids that was keeping them safe, gathering testimonies. So we worked together like that.
Is there a story you might feel comfortable sharing, or that's like you're okay to share for safety reasons, obviously, and stuff like that? But is there something you can share in terms of like what does a day in somebody who does this work look like? What is a day in a life of somebody who does human trafficking work?
It's very dark. You end up. I spent a lot of time with a lot of people that had been sexually abused for a long time, and it's very dangerous work. We were followed home from Costco on a couple of occasions. Our lives were threatened regularly. We had to carry firearms all the time. We still do. Um, you know, Sometimes I still get threatening calls or cars park outside. It's just one of those things. It's part of it. Um, and that's why I always wonder about these people who do these big galas because if they were really involved in anything dangerous, then they wouldn't be having large fundraising events. So we got to meet a lot of people in the space, and a lot of them I weren't impressed with. Um, I think they were fraudulent. Uh, so you become a bit jaded at human beings when you're trying to do something to help a collection of men and women, and you're meeting people who are they're still trafficking them, but they're doing it to raise funds for their own organizations. You become a little jaded.
Mm.
Uh, so it was just, and it gets very home. I nearly lost my daughter to being trafficked. If I didn't know what I knew, I wouldn't have been able to pick up the signs. And I was very grateful for that. Even if all of that was just to be able to save her little life, that was important to me.
What are some things that people should watch out? Like, what are those signs?
We actually did a book called Keeping Kids Safe, and I'll send you a link with that,
Hmm.
and you can make that available to your people. That's on me. Give that away to them.
Thank you. Mm.
And the best thing you can do is be a parent. Today, for some reason, people stop being parents. Like the kids can just do whatever the hell they want. It's like, what? No, they can't. They can't go where they want. They can't watch what they want. They can't say or speak what they want because they're going. The world is not a safe place. It is just not a safe place, and you've got to be prepared to confront those that you love. We only ever confront those that we care for. So you've got to be prepared to confront those that you care for. Have to. And I'll send that to you. It's called Keeping Kids Safe. I'll email it to you after this.
Yeah, I'll make sure to include it in the show notes. What I admire about you, John, is that through everything that you've been through and everything that you see, to still have this very softness, like a kind, and I mean this in like a kind softness to you, because I would imagine that it would just harden a person to see all these things and to continue to see it. Like, how do you, like, I mean, my blood's boiling just listening to it and just like imagining all the things that happen. It's like, how do you find I guess the resilience, what's the word I'm looking for? Like the grace to not have your blood boiling and just give up on the world. Because that's, yeah, I can imagine how it's too much.
Yeah, it is. It is very difficult. Talking about it in a show like this is very difficult, and I'll have to take some time to decompress from it. But what I often think about is if I can just touch one life, if I can help one person realize that they're not alone, and maybe they can look at the absolute storm that my life was and say that if that fella can make it, I can make it too. So for me, I've never asked, I've never prayed, why me? I've only ever prayed that he would turn all things around for good. And that's what motivates me to do things like this, is that someone in your crowd will be touched in such a way that they will have hope, because I spent a lot of years without it. And the grace of a second chance is a glorious thing. It's a glorious thing.
And for people who are listening who do want to support and, and maybe reach out and just mention that they've heard this conversation and support in any way they can or contribute to the mission, where can they get in touch with you? Where can
If
they
they go to
contact?
if they go to drjohnaking.com, follow me on social. It's all drjohnaking.com. If they go to the website, they'll actually see a button for the Mindfire Challenge. If they enroll there, then it's going to be free for them. They can come and start their journey. That's our gift to them. They can book an appointment if they want to try and have a consultation around some stuff. If they want me on their podcast or speak at their events, I do a lot of that sort of stuff. That's probably the best way to do it, is just get on there and have a conversation, man. Go on social media and have a conversation.
Mm,
Let's talk a little bit. If I've got time, I'll talk. If I don't have time, I won't talk.
mm. And we didn't cover this, but tell me a little bit more about your doctorate.
Well,
What did you
I
do?
understand from your notes that this is a clean podcast on Apple Podcasts, so I can't swear. So, my doctorate is in theology. I tell people it's in turning crap into fertilizer, and you fill in the gaps on that one. So it's in theology, but it really is. When I look back, it's the ability to be able to turn things around, for something beautiful to grow out of a mess,
Mm,
and that's what I've done my whole life,
mm.
one way
And
or
what
another.
is and the sisu? Is that the tattoo?
Sisu,
Sisu.
Finnish
What does that
word.
mean?
It's untranslatable really in English. It means white knuckled courage in the face of overwhelming odds. And Susu is the spirit of a person that turns up when everything else is lost. And
Mm,
for me, Susu means relentless resilience. Is just the relentless. My greatest gift is being stubborn. I just will not die having had them win. They did this to me, but they don't define me. I will live a brilliant, beautiful, love filled, joyous, happy, prosperous, gorgeous life, because they tried to take it from me and they're not going to win. Susu.
That's beautiful. That is beautiful. Um, yeah, I mean I don't know what to say. You just you know the work that you do is, like I said, is so impactful, and the message that you share and the grace that you carry it with, and just the impact you make on the people, on myself in this conversation. You definitely made an impact, and I'm sure to my listeners as well. It is beautiful. So, you know, you are living that beautiful life, you know what I mean? Like you're impacting, like I said, like I mean I you know my heart was boiling, but I do feel very fortunate to have been able to have this conversation with you. So
Well, thank you. Thank you. I got a book that's coming out. I'm going to reach out to you when it gets published, and we'll come
yeah,
back and we'll do a part two.
before we wrap up, is there anything that you wish I would have asked you? Is there anything that anything that we didn't talk about that maybe you want to make sure that we mention?
No, I'm really grateful you had me on. You didn't have to. It's a different space, and I'm just really grateful for you giving me a chance to share some truths that are going to touch some people in your audience that may not would have expected to hear it on a podcast on your show. I thought that
Mm.
was very brave of you, so I want to thank you.
No,
So thank
thank
you.
you. I think it's important. We're all humans. This is all part of shifts, of the many
Yes,
shifts we have in
all
life.
parts of shifts.
So thank you, Dr. John.
Thank you. Bye bye.